back to the early weigh-in podcast. This week we go back across the pond for UFC London. Last time we were in London back in March, fighters absolutely blew the roof off the place. There was 9 total finishes, I believe 7 in the first round. We can only hope for something similar there in our return. The card is yet again headlined by Tom Aspinall, taking on again his hardest test to date in Curtis Blaydes, a heavyweight that possesses a style that I'm really intrigued to see how Curtis deals with. And in our co-main event, we lost Darren Till to yet again another injury, but Action Man Chris Curtis stepping up again on short notice, fighting for the 4th time in 8 months when he takes on Jack Hermansson. Paddy the Baddy's on the card, Muhammad Mokaev, Paul Craig, the return of Alexander Gustafsson. I think we're in for an absolute treat on Saturday. Last week's card was full of finishes as well. Probably had a round of the year in round 2 between Matt Schnell and Sumudarji. Absolutely nuts. And it seems those live crowds just continue to play a factor in the fights, produce so much more. Hoping we can get away from that apex and start staying in these live crowds. Both Ty and I did go out in the green last week, so that is nice to see. So we'll quickly go through those cards. Was big on some underdogs last week. Took Li Jiangling and Dustin Stoltzfus for 0.75 units. Thought they came out on top pretty clearly, and were some of my stronger reads at plus money. Miesha Tate, man, got in before the action, and she got 30-27. I think that fighting career for Miesha Tate looks to be probably going down the drain. You know, Burgos one was a little sketchy. Probably got the hometown decision, but I'll ride with it. You know, rarely do you ever get opportunity to lock up plus money on both guys. So to get Jacoby and Dong Jung at plus money, thought it was just a way to absolutely profit either way. Ended up being nice when Jacoby got the stoppage. Lost the over 2.5 rounds in the main event due to an injury. Hate playing things like that due to that reason and got burnt on it. Big 2.5 unit swing almost for me, but I did finish up 0.3 units. You can't go broke making profit. Looking over at Ty's card, Ty's been on an absolute heater lately here. Big on Dustin Jacoby at plus 112. Cashes in the first round, early stoppage or not, absolutely dropped him. Got him on Stoltzfus, love to see that. Fight doesn't go the distance, and Michelle Watterson, Amanda Lemos opted just to take the fight doesn't go the distance there instead of Lemos inside the distance. Nice 1.75 unit profit there. And, man, you know, Ricky Simone wins that fight by decision probably 70% of the time almost. Clipped him and ended up getting the sub. I think he was on track to hit that. Ty finishes up 4.46 units for an incredible night and looking to continue that into next week. I am rocking it solo this week with him on vacation in Montana, but do us a quick favor, like and sub the video before we get started. First up in the main event, we have Curtis Blaydes taking on Tom Aspinall. Currently, Curtis Blaydes is sitting at the plus 110 underdog. Tom Aspinall minus 130, and it's a bit of a foreign territory there for Curtis Blaydes. I believe he's opened as an underdog once in his career in one of the Francis fights, but never closed as an underdog in any of his UFC fights to date. You know, that alone, combined with the experience at the highest level, man, at first glance, I think there's value on Blaydes. I really do. The guy's been a fight away from the belt twice before getting, knocked out. And while people question his chin, only really the Derek Lewis was like a clean knockout. Even the ones from Francis, eye was blown up, still wobbling across the cage. I'm not sold he has really chin issues yet. But he's a grinder, man. He'll get right back to work. The dude just turned 31 years old this year, and in the heavyweight division, he's got a lifetime ahead of him entering the prime of his career now. And he's really the lone heavyweight who's just like an absolute dominating wrestler, outside of maybe like Alexander Romanov, but even that I don't consider on the level of Curtis Blaydes. But he's making those improvements on the feet. You saw it last time out with the finish over Daukaus, was content to strike for 2 rounds, and was real open about wanting to show that he's more of a wrestler. But, it's the wrestling for me that got him to the top. I want to see the Blaydes that's out there landing 5+ takedowns, completely neutralizing opponents. Matt return the moment they get back up. But the one that I'm seeing now just looks more content to mix it up on the feet. Didn't really care to wrestle Derek Lewis at all, and which in my opinion should have been one of his easiest fights to date. Takedown should have come much easier. In the Rosenstruik fight, he wrestles a little bit, the majority, in the 3rd round after he gets caught with the knee. And he's put in trouble a little bit. Wrestling should have been much higher on the priority list in that fight. And then in the Daukaus fight, Daukaus is just a poor man Aspinall, in my opinion, and he didn't shoot once. He was very content to stand and strike. And when you're laying in your hands like that, I guess you trust yourself. But the Curtis Blaydes I want to see is the one that I want to wrestle. I don't want him standing with Tom and Here lately not seeing him wrestle, I think it might be enough to keep me off. With Aspinall, I always talk about it's been him and Cyril Gahn who's kind of led the way for the division as the new life. There's been very few seconds where Aspinall's even looked human. I thought each fight this guy's looked incrementally better. I took the chance on Spivak, thought the line was wide. Took the chance on Alexander Romanov. Aspinall's just kind of been a guy that's a tough one for me to get a read on. I've never seen him really tested late, and when he does, he loses, decisions. And I'm not sure about the cardio, but every time I think there's potential for the guy to get tested, he just absolutely passes with flying colors, finishing both Spivak and, excellent head movement, nice double leg straight to the key lock, whatever it was there on Alexander Romanov. I mean, we saw Curtis Blaydes have to land numerous takedowns and was never close to really getting Romanov out of there. It just speaks to the level of jiu-jitsu that Tom Aspinall's going to have. It comes down to, in my opinion, it's going to be a grappler versus striker here. I think it's clear Aspinall's got the fundamental boxing advantage. He's got the clear footwork, big hand speed advantage, and there's potential for him to win this fight on the feet early. But I think it's just as clear as day, man, who's going to have the better wrestling. And I think that's Curtis Blaydes. The jiu-jitsu, the takedown defense, I don't think it's going to be enough to keep Aspinall off his back. I don't necessarily think I have the best read. I think it is kind of lined appropriately. Curtis Blaydes is the one having to make this big travel. Aspinall does have the home crowd, home field advantage here. Big power, big speed upside early. But, I think it's dog or pass here, and I think Ty and I both are going to come out on the side of Curtis Blaydes. In our co-main event, we have Jack Hermansson taking on Chris Curtis. They've got this fight as a pick-em -110 each currently. Would have been nice to have Darren Till taking on Jack Hermansson here. Really excited to see Darren Till get back in there, but can't seem to get the injuries away. But as of late, no one's been on a tear like Chris Curtis has. He's 3-0 in the UFC, 2 knockouts, and coming off his decision win just 3 weeks ago over Rodolfo Vieira. The takedown defense, it looked on point, stuffed all 20 attempts from Rodolfo Vieira, and then really started landing his hands in round 2, started letting his hands go once he got more confident in that takedown defense, and really started to work that body late, and I thought he was actually close to getting Rodolfo out of there in rounds 2 and 3. Chris Curtis opened as the underdog. Money just came pouring in on him early, and I was actually able to get Jack at plus money here. I think that is an absolute steal. Now that fight week has started, I think you're seeing some money come back in on Jack, taking this to a pick'em, and I think it's just because, Chris Curtis is the UFC's new shiny prospect who's 3-0, who's been fighting recently, been fighting a lot, much like Kevin Holland, in 2020 or 2021, whichever it was. I think there's just a lot of love for a guy right now because he's been in everybody's face recently. Where Jack's the true middleweight here, and while, it's been nice for Chris Curtis not to have to cut all this weight and be able to fight at middleweight, the further he goes up in the division when he gets to these primary bigger guys who are able to wrestle him, I think he's going to run into some issues, and Jack, I think, is going to be a much better wrestler and is going to test that takedown defense much better than Rodolfo, who I consider, much more of a jiu-jitsu specialist than all-out wrestler. And on the feet, I'm not necessarily counting out Jack as well, man. He's much longer, stays behind his jab, nice leg kicks on the outside. But I think, let's just make it easy here, Jack. Let's mix in the wrestling. You got the submission threat as well. You got the wrestling edge. I don't know why Jack wouldn't mix it in here. He was coming on a fight over Darren Till where you got to think that was in the game plan. And think it should be here. While I look through the resume of Jack, there isn't really any wins that just absolutely blow me away. He only has losses to title challengers like Vittori and Cannonier and potential number 1 contenders like Strickland. He's been in numerous 5-round fights, gone 5 rounds, beaten guys like, Kevin Gastelum, Jacare, and even, someone like Edmond, who's a dangerous striker. I think Chris Curtis is a little bit in over his head here. He's obviously taking a nice spot, probably getting paid pretty decent for it. Gonna, look to be 4-0 in the UFC, jump some big rankings, put himself in a big fight. But I think this number, man, I'm absolutely willing to gamble on Hermansson, who I think's been the more established middleweight throughout his UFC tenure and could come out here and mix this up and make it look easy. So pick for me is going to be Hermansson. For my fight of the night, I'm going to stay in the light heavyweight division where we see Paul Craig taking on Volkan Oezdemir. Currently, Oezdemir sitting at -165 and Paul Craig to come back at +140. It's one of these fights, man, that I think finishes at a super high clip and absolutely worthy for my fight of the night. Ty and I, we do both have some action on Volkan Oezdemir here, and it looks like the money seems to be reflecting some of the same things that we're seeing in this fight. For Paul Craig, once upon a time, Paul Craig, before this like 5-fight win streak it is that he's on or something, he was fighting for his job. He was pulling out Hail Marys in round 3 with submissions over Magomed Ankalaev left with 1 second, Kennedy with like 40 seconds, and he was seconds away from being on a 5-fight losing streak in the UFC and cut. And you look at some of the wins he's had recently, Vinicius Moreira, Gadzimir Antigulov, Shogun Hua. It's very, very low-level wins, in my opinion. I don't believe any of those are still with the UFC. And while you might look at the last two, much more, they look better on paper, Jamal Hill and Nikita Krylov. Dude, both of these guys just make bonehead mistakes, show very low fight IQ, willing to play around in Paul Craig's guard, and it really cost them. And I'm a firm believer if you run those fights back, I think Paul Craig loses those more times than he wins. I truly think that. For Oezdemir, man, it's relatively simple. When you drop this guy, let him back up. Don't be the third victim to just show extremely low fight IQ. Follow him to the ground and give him his only path to victory. Luckily, Ozdemir's not been much of a grappler in his tenure. 0.61 takedowns every 15 minutes. 2 recorded takedowns in his 10 UFC fights. I doubt that the wrestling is in the game plan on Saturday morning. And if he's willing to keep this fight on the feet, not make any bonehead mistakes, I think he's got Craig's number on the feet. He's developed a nice calf kick that I think is going to tear Paul Craig's wide stance up, really make Paul Craig have to close that distance and get hit. I think Volkan's the better striker. He's got lights out power match with the chin that has just been relatively iffy in the past. Oezdemir, man, he's coming off fighting, in my opinion, the best 3 light heavyweights on the roster, and Alexander Rakic, your champion, Jiri Prochazka, and maybe your next champion, Magomed Ankalaev. I think this is a perfect buy low spot on Volkan Oezdemir. I expect him to land on the chin of Craig in probably those first 2 rounds and put him away. I'm expecting violence here. Fight doesn't go the distance, minus 310. I think it's playable. I am expecting a finish and probably put that in a parlay somewhere. So one other line I looked at on FanDuel, fight doesn't go the distance, minus 310. So you got to think about the over 1.5. That should be somewhere probably around, minus 155, or the under 1.5 should be minus 155. Somewhere, it's half the fight time. But we got fight doesn't start round 3, which is 10 minutes of fight time at minus 146 on FanDuel. You got 10 minutes for Paul Craig to find a submission or for Volkan Oezdemir to land on the chin. And I like that to happen, man. So I'm gonna take Volkan Oezdemir inside the distance. For my fighter to watch on the card, no other than Paddy the Batty Pimblett. You can't have Paddy on a London card and not sit here and discuss him at all. And while a lot of people may think Jordan Leavitt is live for the upset, I am loaded. I'm ready to fade Paddy in the future, man, but I don't think this spot is it here. 100% has holes to his game. I think they're quite glaring. Despite showing a hell of a chin in the debut, he does tend to drop his hands, get hit a bit more than you like. And then in the defensive wrestling, in Cage Warriors, when he fought some good offensive wrestlers, he tend to have some issues there. But the guy's grown so much since those times, in my opinion. Physique-wise, he looks like a completely different fighter. And the skills from Jordan Leavitt, they don't really worry me here, if you want my honest opinion. I don't rate Jordan Leavitt as this high-level striker Paddy's going to be able to just have issues with on the feet. I think Paddy figures him out and has his number on the feet here. If I lean some way on the feet, it's 100% to Paddy. And while Leavitt prides himself on having that good jiu-jitsu, man, he's not strong in any of those positions. I think Paddy's going to be the much physically stronger person here and has equally as good of a ground game himself. The only real concern for me, his last 4 fights in like 4 years, Paddy hasn't been out of the first round. And, he also gets out of shape in camps. And I don't want to go out on a limb and say that drastically affects his performances. But if you cut a lot of weight like that and you work a lot in fights, I'm worried that later on, in rounds 2 and 3, cardio could get tested a little bit. The cardio affected down the stretch of Jordan Leavitt, though, his cardio wasn't on display in the Trey Ogden fight at all. I thought that was extremely sloppy. I thought he slowed down bad. And his cardio was just as affected in a high grappling fight like that. And that was a very, very low-level fight against Trey Ogden. And I thought that, you run Paddy and Trey Ogden back, and he makes it look so much easier. I'm just not been high on Jordan Leavitt. It's going to suck ass if we see this guy twerking in London after an upset, but not see it happening here. I do not think Paddy keeps his first round finish streak alive. I actually think this could get into 2 and 3, and maybe even see Patty winning a decision here. So I do have Patty in a parlay, but I am thinking about taking his decision prop, which is a very, very nice number. I know he's not been out of the first round, but Leavitt tends to be a pretty durable guy. And, man, I think there are going to be a ton of eyes on Patty, and hopefully we see another finish, but I think he sees a decision here. I'm going to give you a second fighter to watch on the card, and it no-brainer here, Muhammad Mokaev. Everybody's going to have his eyes on this guy. He's the hometown London, and he's one of the UFC's youngest fighters on the roster. So much hype surrounding this guy. Thought it'd be great to talk about him as well. 5-0 as a pro, but a very extensive amateur background. The guy's been surrounded by martial arts his entire life. Moved from Dagestan down to London as a young kid. Just no surprise UFC's booked him on these London cards. He has potential to be a star. UFC's really trying to push him up. Also looked like the spotlight doesn't really tend to fade him. He's talking shit on Curtis Durden. Went out there, put him away in round one, flying knees, snatched up the neck. Looked to really be enjoying the moment. I think the skill set of this guy, as he continues to develop, grow up, he's going to be a problem down the line. His opponent in Charles Johnson, man, I don't think he's no slouch, though, to be honest with you. And looking at their exchanges online, this guy's coming to fight. He's a big flyweight. I know he's in phenomenal shape. His last 3 fights have been scheduled for 5 rounds. Got the finish in round 5 last time. His cardio looks on point. He's got a nice teep kick. Very good fundamental boxing. Mokaev, to me, I don't think he wants to strike with Charles Johnson. He's going to have a big speed advantage on the feet, and I think he can piece him up from the outside. He likes to play that range game a little bit more than Charles. But I think Mokaev should really mix in the takedowns and just wear on Johnson here. I think he's going to have a massive grappling edge here. You got a ton of eyes on Mokaev on Saturday. It's a much harder fight, in my opinion, than Cody Durden in front of him. I think we might see him get tested a bit more, but yeah, I'm not fading the UFC's boy. I think Mokaev comes out on top Saturday. For my underdog of the night, I struggled to pick one from either the co or the main event. I think that's where your 2 live underdogs are. Other than that, I think I think a lot of favorites come through on Saturday. You might make the case for some lines that are wide, but as far as who I think is going to go out and win, it's going to go with Jack Hermansson here. Was set at plus money last week when the people stormed in on Chris Curtis when the line dropped. So I did get him at plus 112. Jack Hermansson sat there last week, and I don't necessarily know where the line's going to finish. Currently sitting as a pick'em at the moment, but I think it's an easy choice to pick Jack here. He's been training for the primary striker in Darren Till. Seeing Darren Till's weaknesses with the grappling, you got to 100% think that that's what Jack was coming out here to do, and that's wrestle. And I don't think the game plan should change here one bit. Big wrestling advantage to go with the natural size and strength advantage of being the natural middleweight. But he's not necessarily been my favorite middleweight to back. I think Jack's kind of given up in some fights, kind of quit on himself a little bit when things weren't going his way in the Cannonier fights and the Vittori fights. But they're very high-profile 5-rounder fights with much harder title challengers in front of him. Outside of just like pure counter boxing, that I lean toward Chris Curtis. I think Jack's going to have a lot of advantages in this fight that make him a real live underdog, and even at pick'ems, I think there's a ton of value on the more established UFC middleweight. I capped Jack around a minus 140, minus 150 here, so to get plus money on him last week, hopefully that's an absolute steal come Saturday. For my prop section, I'm going to go with Alexander Gustafsson by decision at plus 420. Gustafsson making his return and looks to be taking this one a bit more serious. Was once one of the best light heavyweights in the world. Extremely close, to capturing gold twice. Put on just incredible fights with both John Jones and DC. But in the last 3, the fire just didn't look to be there. In the second fight with John Jones, wasn't competitive at all. Ran right through him on the mat. Tried to bounce back against Anthony Lionheart Smith, and Lionheart gave him that Lionheart type of fight, and he didn't like it. Ended up getting submitted in the 4th round, and then you see him start searching for answers, moving up to heavyweight. Things not panning out as well there, getting submitted in the 1st round by Fabricio Verdum. It's now been 2 years. The Fire, in my opinion, looks to be back online. Looking at him, he's back at light heavyweight here. He's training at All Stars Sweden with Hamzat, with Oezdemir. Looks to be in real good shape, and opponent here, Nikita Krylov, that in my opinion shouldn't be this big of a favorite. There's a lot of stock being put into this layoff, and if there wasn't a 2-year layoff here, you might even see this a fight of pick'em where Gustafsson a slight favorite. Looking through Krylov's resume and who he's fought, His best win might be Johnny Walker, a guy who has just not panned out at all. If this fight stays on the feet, I like Gus to use his range. He's by far the superior striker, the nice kickboxer. But I'm expecting Krylov to try to wrestle here, try to do what Lionheart, what John Jones, what Fabricio did. I think Gus is ready for it, man. You're talking about a level of wrestling that's nowhere close to John Jones. You're talking about nowhere near the submission threat of black belts like Verdum and Lionheart. I don't think Krylov's going to have the same success wrestling, and I think he's going to get stuck on the feet, get picked apart here by Gus. So my thought process behind this one, I do favor Gus ever so slightly, and I think we actually see this fight go the full 15 minutes at a good clip, and I'm getting twice the price tag on him, and I also don't have to go as heavy with all the question marks surrounding him. So Nikita Krylov, when the guy loses, 90% of the time it's by submission from better grapplers. And I like Gus to keep this on the feet, pick away his kickboxing, en route to win a decision. Cash that plus 420 ticket for me. For my best bet of the week, I'm going to go Mark DeCasey. My first bet on Mark was at minus 290 and an absolute spot on with my breakdown here. Mark DeCasey wins this fight 75-80% of the time and is 100% my most comfortable parlay piece this week. At one time on a 2-fight win streak or a 2-fight losing streak, didn't really look like in the best headspace, man. But you're talking about losses to Rafael Fiziev and then taking a year and a half off, coming back to fight Rafael Alves, who was just one of the most dangerous guys in round one. Thought we saw an incrementally improved Mark DeCasey, a much more well-rounded Mark DeCasey against Slava Borishev, and showed that he's much more than a striker, willing to round out his game, not afraid to have that different game plan. And when he thinks he has a grappling advantage, go to it. Training looks to be taken very serious. All-Stars camp last time looks to be already in London. Training with Nathaniel Wood and some guys leading up to this fight. And I just really, really struggle to see where there's an area that Demir is better than Mark DeCasey here. I doubt I get any pushback from a single person that says, on the feet, it's Mark all day, man. He's twice the striker of Demir, in my opinion. So much faster, so much technical. Mixes in the striking very well. He's going to wear up the body, wear out the legs, and really start to find the home for the hands, I think. And for Demir, you look at how the fights he's lost. He struggled with the grappling ever since he was signed to the UFC, giving up numerous takedowns in fights, and every fight that he's lost, it's due to the inability, to compete in the grappling. And I won't be shocked if we see Mark DeCasey mix in some wrestling as well, like he did in that Slava Borishev fight. And if he spends a lot of time there, not counting a submission off the table as well, seems to really found a love for that grappling lately. That's dangerous for a guy who's already as good as he is on the feet. I think he's playable for minus 300 to minus 400. I think he has potential to cover that price tag. I've got him parlayed everywhere this week. I might even look at that inside the distance prop. I don't see Mark DeCasey losing this fight on Saturday. And finally, for the quick pick section, run through here and give you the pick for every fight. First up in the welterweight division, we got Nicholas Dalby taking on Claudio Silva. Ty and I both on Nicholas Dalby. Doubt we have any action on that one. Moving down, we got the women's flyweight division. Mandy Bohm taking on Victoria Leonardo. Been a fight with a lot of love on it this week, and Ty's got some action on Victoria Leonardo before I saw a lot of people. So it's enticing me that she could be a live dog, but she has been a fade for me in the past, man. And so I'll go head-to-head with Ty on this one. I'll take Mandy Bohm just with no confidence. 155, we got Jai Herbert taking on Kyle Nelson. Fight ends by TKO, I think, is a very good line, but I like Jai Herbert to keep his range in London here, get the TKO over Kyle Nelson. Mokaev versus Charles Johnson. Ty and I both going to go Muhammad Mokaev. Would really like to mix in the grappling there. Makwan Amirkhani taking on Jonathan Pierce. Makwan round one sub, always live. Jonathan Pierce left his neck out quite a bit of times against Christian Rodriguez. Got put through the ringer by Joe Lozon in Boston. I'm not really interested in betting this fight. Jonathan Pierce is one of those guys that take over late. You might get a live bet on him at a much better price. Ty and I both are going to take Jonathan Pierce. Nathaniel Wood moving up to 145 to take on Charles Rosa. Normally when somebody moves up and they're the big favorite, I would try to fade them. But Charles Rosa is just not the guy I like to back. Ty and I both taking Nathaniel Wood. 155, Mark DeCasey versus Damir Hasdovich. DeCasey, my best bet. Ty's on him as well. And then our featured prelim, we have Ludovic Klein taking on Mason Jones. I believe Ludovic Klein taking this on short notice. He's staying at lightweight in his second fight here, but man, I like Mason Jones a lot in this fight. Ty's taking him as well. And then we get to our main card. Starting us off, we got Paul Craig taking on Volkan Oezdemir at light heavyweight. Ty and I both got some action on Volkan Oezdemir. I think he puts Paul Craig away. Molly McCann taking on Hannah Goldie. Both of us are on Molly McCann, but not laying that chalk there. Moving up to 205 again, Nikita Krylov taking on Alexander Gustafsson. Ty and I both going to take a shot on Alexander Gustafsson in his return as the underdog. And then our big three fights in the lightweight division, we got Paddy Pimblett taking on Jordan Leavitt. Ty and I both going to be on Paddy Pimblett there, but he might not get that first round finish like he's used to. I'm actually got a feeling he takes this one by decision. In our co-main event, Jack Hermansson versus Chris Curtis. Only the second fight Ty and I are going to be disagreeing on here. He's taking action man Chris Curtis. Think there's a lot of value on Jack Hermansson, especially as an underdog, even at plus money. But give me Jack Hermansson. And then in the main event, we got Curtis Blaydes versus Tom Aspinall. I know Tyler does have some action on Curtis Blaydes. I don't know if I get there personally, but that's where the value is in my opinion, and I think I'm going to stay with the dog and Curtis Blaydes as well for my pick. That's 14 fights on the books. They are early fights in London, so make sure you're up watching those. Appreciate you hanging out with me. Ty will be back next week. Make sure to like, sub to the channel, comment in the comment section who you guys have in this main event. Very curious to see your thoughts here. We'll see you guys next week.